Clara believed her husband was a simple man. She saw Liam as a collection of quiet habits and modest ambitions, an architect who drew neat lines on paper but never dared to draw a bold one in his own life. His calm was, to her, a lack of passion. His patience, a deficiency of drive. She didn't know that his simplicity was a shield. His calm was the deep, still water that runs over a powerful turbine, and his patience was the deliberate, measured strategy of a grandmaster. She didn't know that, in the silent world behind his thoughtful gray eyes, empires were being designed, not just buildings. Within 24 hours, her entire world, a glittering palace of assumptions built on the foundations she so proudly claimed as her own, would crumble into a fine, worthless dust. The man she thought she had generously lifted up was, in fact, the very ground beneath her feet, and he was about to shift. If you've ever felt underestimated, if you've ever had your worth dismissed by those who should have known it best, then this story is for you. It's a story about the quiet strength that arrogance can never see. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from today, as we journey into this world of hidden truths and startling revelations. And if you enjoy stories where dignity triumphs and true worth is finally revealed, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Now let's begin. The end began, as it so often does, at a dinner party. It was held at the sprawling estate of Clara's parents, Richard and Eleanor Vance. The house was a monument to old money, or at least the meticulous performance of it. Ivory columns framed a grand entrance, and the air inside was thick with the scent of lilies and self-congratulation. Liam had always felt like a foreign object in that house, a plain wooden chair placed in a room full of gilded antiques. He wore a simple, well-tailored navy suit, but in the Vances world, simplicity was not a sign of elegance. It was a sign of inadequacy. "Liam, my boy," Richard boomed, clapping a heavy hand on Liam's shoulder. Richard was a man who occupied space with an aggressive confidence, his voice a perpetual announcement of his own importance. "Still tinkering with your little projects? Drawing your blueprints?" Liam managed a polite smile. "Something like that, Richard. We just broke ground on the Helios Tower downtown." Richard waved a dismissive hand, a diamond signet ring flashing under the chandelier. "Ah, yes, office buildings. Necessary, I suppose. Bricks and mortar. I'm in the business of vision, myself. We're moving into venture capital. Shaping the future, you know. You have to think big to be big," he winked, as if sharing a profound secret Liam couldn't possibly comprehend. Clara, standing beside them, laughed a light, tinkling laugh that sounded to Liam like breaking glass. "Oh, Daddy, don't tease him. Liam is very methodical. He likes his safe, predictable lines." She squeezed Liam's arm, a gesture that looked like affection but felt like a leash. She was turning his professional diligence into a character flaw, a piece of evidence for the case she was perpetually building against him in her mind. Later, as they sat around a dining table that could have comfortably seated a board of directors, Eleanor turned her serene, cutting gaze on him. "Clara tells us you're hesitant about the Monaco trip this summer," she said, her voice smooth as silk but laced with steel. "It's such a wonderful opportunity for her to network. The yacht show is a prime gathering for people of substance." The implication hung in the air, as visible as the condensation on a water goblet. People of substance, and then there was Liam. "We were just discussing the budget, Eleanor," Liam replied, his voice even. He refused to be baited, to show the sting of her words. "It's a significant expense." "Expense?" Richard chuckled from the head of the table. "Son, you have to spend money to be in the world where money is made. It's an investment in your lifestyle, in Clara's happiness. Surely you can see that." "Of course, Daddy is right," Clara chimed in, not looking at Liam, but at her father as if seeking his approval. "My friends are all going. The LaCroix have their villa, the Barringtons are chartering a yacht. It's embarrassing to have to pinch pennies." The phrase pinch pennies was a deliberate cruelty. They lived in a 4,000-square-foot home in the city's most desirable neighborhood. Clara drove a new Mercedes, and her wardrobe was a rotating collection of designer labels. The life they lived was anything but frugal. But in her world, a world defined by relentless comparison, anything less than the most extravagant option was a form of poverty. Liam felt a familiar, cold weight settle in his gut. It was the weight of being perpetually misunderstood, deliberately diminished. He looked at his wife, at the beautiful, discontented woman she had become, and felt a profound sense of distance. He remembered the woman he had married, the one who had admired his quiet intensity, who had claimed to love him for the very qualities her family now derided. That woman was gone, replaced by this polished, anxious reflection of her parents' values. He took a slow sip of water, his gaze steady. Inside his mind, a ledger was being updated. This conversation, this casual, smiling humiliation, was another entry. An asset of patience spent, a liability of resentment accrued. He knew, with a certainty that was as solid as the foundations he designed, that all structures have a breaking point. And the foundation of his marriage was crumbling under the unbearable weight of their contempt. He remained silent for the rest of the dinner, a quiet observer. He watched Richard pontificate about a new real estate venture he was certain would be a goldmine. He watched Eleanor subtly critique the service of her own hired staff. He watched Clara bask in her parents' approval, laughing at their jokes, adopting their opinions, becoming smaller and smaller as she tried to fit into their grand, hollow world. And in his silence, Liam made a decision. He would let them believe they were right. He would let them continue to underestimate him. It was, he realized, his greatest advantage. For now. The days that followed the dinner party were a study in escalating tension. The Monaco trip became a constant, simmering source of conflict. Clara would leave travel brochures on his pillow, open to pages showing turquoise waters and gleaming superyachts. She would sigh theatrically while scrolling through her social media feeds, making sure he could see the pictures her friends were posting from street barts or Dubai. "Look at this," she'd say, angling her phone towards him. "That's Charlotte's husband. He just surprised her with a new Bentley. He's only 35. Liam would look up from his tablet, where he was reviewing the complex financial models of a multi-billion-dollar urban regeneration project in Seoul, a project his firm, Thorne and Associates, was leading. To Clara, it was just him, playing with his little budget apps. "That's nice for them," he'd reply, his voice neutral. "Nice? Liam, it's a Bentley. Don't you ever want more? Don't you ever want to give me more?" Her voice would rise, a familiar edge of accusation creeping in. "I have a reputation to maintain, a family legacy. I can't show up to the country club in a 5-year-old sedan while you're content to just draft buildings." He never told her that the 5-year-old sedan was a deliberate choice, a way to remain unobtrusive. He never told her that he owned a collection of classic cars stored in a climate-controlled facility, a quiet passion he kept for himself because he knew she would only see them as assets to be flaunted. He never told her that Thorne and Associates wasn't just his little firm. It was a global powerhouse in architectural design and sustainable urban planning, with a valuation that would make her father's venture capital fund look like a child's piggy bank. He had built it quietly, meticulously, under a name that wasn't his own, using his middle name, Thorne, to create a firewall between his professional and personal life. It had started as a way to see if he could succeed on merit alone, without the Vance name Clara had been so keen for him to leverage. Over the years, it had become his sanctuary. One afternoon, Richard called him, his voice oozing a practiced, paternal charm. "Liam, my boy, I have an opportunity for you. A chance to finally get in the game." Liam leaned back in his leather office chair, a chair that looked out over the entire city from the 60th floor of the Helios Tower he had just completed, and listened. "It's a prime parcel of land just outside the city," Richard explained, his voice quickening with excitement. "The zoning is a bit tricky, but I have connections. We're going to get it rezoned for luxury condos. It's a guaranteed 10-to-1 return. I'm putting together a small group of investors, and I'm letting you in on the ground floor. I need you to commit 500,000 inch." Liam swiveled his chair to face his monitor. He pulled up the property records for the parcel Richard was describing. He cross-referenced it with geological surveys and city planning proposals he had access to. The land was on an unstable floodplain. The city had designated it as a protected watershed. The chances of it being rezoned were zero. Richard's connections were either lying to him, or he was being swindled. Or, most likely, he was knowingly trying to offload a toxic asset onto unsuspecting investors. "Richard," Liam said calmly, "I've looked at the preliminary data on that area. The fundamentals are weak. There are significant environmental and zoning risks." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then a short, sharp laugh. "Data? Fundamentals? Liam, you think about things like an employee. You have to think like an owner, a visionary. Risks are for little people. We make the rules. Look, I'm offering you a seat at the big table. Don't be timid. I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I'm going to have to pass." "Suit yourself," Richard said, his voice suddenly cold. "Stay in your little sandbox. Just don't come crying to me when you're still drawing lines on paper while the rest of us are redrawing the map." He hung up. That evening, Clara was furious. "My father called me," she said, her voice tight with rage as she stood in the doorway of his home study. "He told me you refused his offer. He extended a hand to pull you up, to finally make you a part of something real, and you spat on it. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is for me?" "It was a bad investment, Clara," Liam said simply, not looking up from the schematics on his desk. "A bad investment?" she scoffed. "My father has been in business since before you were born. He built an empire. And you, an architect, you think you know better? You're just afraid. You're afraid of success. You'd rather be a small man your whole life than take one single risk." He finally looked up at her. Her face was flushed, her beautiful features twisted with a disappointment so profound it was almost a caricature. He saw in that moment the vast, unbridgeable chasm between them. She didn't see a husband exercising prudent judgment. She saw a coward confirming her deepest fears about him. "Maybe you're right," he said, his voice so quiet she had to strain to hear it. His agreement seemed to deflate her. She had been ready for a fight, and his soft surrender left her without a target. She just stared at him for a moment, then turned and walked away, the sharp click of her heels on the hardwood floor echoing in the silence. After she left, Liam opened a locked drawer in his desk. He pulled out a small, heavy object, a single old-fashioned skeleton key made of dark, burnished brass. It didn't belong to any door in this house. It belonged to the private penthouse suite he maintained atop the Helios Tower, a space no one, not even Clara, knew existed. It was his real home, the place where the quiet architect disappeared and Mr. Thorne, the visionary her father pretended to be, came into focus. He held the key in his palm, its weight a familiar comfort. It was a reminder of the solid, unshakable truth of his life, a truth he had kept hidden for far too long. He looked out the window at the garden, at the perfectly manicured lawn and the prize-winning roses Clara was so proud of. It was a beautiful cage, and he realized, as he closed his hand around the key, that he was finally ready to unlock the door and walk away. He picked up his phone and made a call to a number he knew by heart. "Mr. Harrison," he said, his voice calm and clear, "it's time. Please prepare the full portfolio." "Yes, everything. And I'll need you to be available tomorrow evening. It's time to redraw the map." The quiet before the storm was a Tuesday evening that felt no different from any other. A fragile peace had settled over the house since Liam's quiet surrender to Clara's accusations. She treated him with a kind of weary condescension, the way one might treat a disappointing but ultimately harmless pet. She was making her own plans for Monaco, assuming she could convince him in the end, or perhaps leverage her father's influence to secure the funds. She moved through their home with an air of restless entitlement, oblivious to the tectonic plates shifting silently beneath her. Liam watched her, a strange sense of detachment settling over him. He felt like an anthropologist observing a civilization on the brink of collapse, noting its rituals and customs with a clinical, almost sorrowful precision. He saw the way she checked her reflection in every available surface, The way her smile never quite reached her eyes. The way she spoke of her friend's acquisitions with a mixture of envy and reverence. He was cataloging the final moments of their life together, not with anger, but with a profound and heavy clarity. The catalyst, when it came, was the house itself. "I've just confirmed with the caterer," Clara announced, walking into the living room where Liam was reading. She was holding her phone, a triumphant look on her face. "And the florist can do the centerpieces. The invitations for the Children's Hospital Charity Gala will go out on Monday." Liam placed his book down, a marker carefully inserted between the pages. "The gala? Clara, we talked about this. I said it wasn't a good time to host an event of that scale. And I decided you were being overly cautious as usual," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "This is important. Hosting this gala solidifies our place in the community. It's the event of the season. Everyone who is anyone will be here. It's our home, Clara, not a public venue. And it's an immense expense and liability." "Oh, please," she scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Don't talk to me about expense. What would you know about it? You who is afraid to invest with my father. You who wants to vacation in a cabin instead of on the Riviera. This house, this life is possible because of my family, my connections. My father gave us the down payment for this house. Without him, you'd still be living in some sterile, shoebox apartment." Her words hit the air like stones, hard and ugly. This was the core of her belief system, the foundational myth of their marriage. That she was the source of their prosperity, and he was the lucky beneficiary of her largesse. He looked around the room, at the custom-made furniture, the curated art on the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a city he had helped to shape. And he finally, fully understood. It wasn't just that she didn't see him. It was that she couldn't. Her entire identity was built on the fiction of her own superiority. He stood up slowly. The quiet, accommodating husband she knew was gone. In his place was a man she had never met, a man of profound and unnerving stillness. "Don't you dare use that tone with me, Liam," she snapped, sensing the shift. "I am tired of your ingratitude. I am tired of you holding me back with your pathetic, middle-class anxieties. My friends pity me. They see my potential, and they see you, this anchor, dragging me down." The words kept coming, a torrent of long-simmering resentments. "I have a family name that opens doors. I have a legacy. What do you have? Nothing but your little blueprints and your timid little soul." She took a breath, her chest heaving, her eyes flashing with a righteous fire. And then she delivered the final, fatal blow. The words that would echo in the ruins of her life. "You should thank God every single day, Liam," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You should get down on your knees and thank God that I lowered myself to marry you." He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just waited for the sound of her words to fade, for the ugly vibrations to dissipate in the quiet air of the room he had paid for. A strange, cold calm washed over him. The final entry in the ledger had been made. The account was now ready to be settled. He met her furious gaze, and his own eyes were like polished steel. "You're right about one thing, Clara," he said, his voice perfectly level, devoid of heat or anger. It was the calm at the eye of a hurricane, and it was far more terrifying than any rage. "I should have been more thankful, not to God, to my own accountants, for their meticulous record-keeping." She blinked, confused. This wasn't the reaction she expected. She was braced for a fight or a retreat, not this cryptic, chilling composure. "What are you talking about?" "The down payment," he began, his voice as precise as the lines he drew. "You mentioned your father gave it to us. That's not quite accurate. My holding company, Thorn Capital, extended a private, high-interest loan to Vance Enterprises 3 years ago. Your father was on the brink of insolvency. That loan for $1 million was then gifted to us for the down payment. It was my money, Clara, funneled through your father to preserve his pride and your illusions. That loan, by the way, was called due this morning. He has defaulted." Clara's face went pale. A flicker of disbelief warred with a rising tide of fear. You're lying. My father, his business is booming. He's a visionary. Your father, Liam continued, his voice relentless, has been using his reputation as collateral for years, borrowing from one venture to pay for another. A house of cards in a hurricane. The can't-miss real estate deal he offered me? It was a toxic asset he was trying to offload onto a new investor, me, to cover his margin calls. My refusal to invest was the final straw that broke his financial back. He walked over to his briefcase, which sat by the window. He opened it and took out a sleek, dark gray tablet. He swiped the screen and turned it to face her. On it was the website for Forbes magazine, the page open to an article published that very day. The headline read, "The Quiet Titan: How Architect Liam Thorne Secretly Built a Global Real Estate Empire." There was a picture of him, not in a suit, but on a construction site, looking confident and focused. "My little firm, as you call it, isn't Thorne Architecture," he said. "That's just a small, local subsidiary I maintain for personal projects. My main business is Thorne and Associates, a global design and development conglomerate. The Helios Tower wasn't just a project I worked on. My company owns it. We own the land it's on and the 3 city blocks surrounding it. This house, the cars, your credit cards, your father's country club membership for the last 3 years. Every single thing is paid for by Thorne and Associates. Not from our joint account, which I kept modestly funded to maintain this performance." She stared at the tablet, her mouth slightly agape. Her brain seemed to be short-circuiting, unable to process the information. The man she had dismissed as a simple draftsman was being hailed as a titan. The life she thought she had bestowed upon him was one he had secretly bankrolled. "No," she whispered. It was a pathetic, fragile sound. "No, it's not possible." As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Its clear, melodic chime cut through the suffocating tension in the room. Liam didn't even look towards the door. "That will be my lawyer, Mr. Harrison. I asked him to come by." He walked to the door and opened it. A tall, impeccably dressed man in his late 60s stood on the threshold, holding a thick leather briefcase. He had silver hair and the kind of unassailable dignity that comes from decades of wielding quiet power. "Mr. Thorne," the man said, his voice a respectful baritone. He stepped inside, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. Clara's shocked face, the tablet still glowing with the Forbes article, without a flicker of surprise. He nodded once at Clara, a curt, dismissive gesture, before turning his full attention back to Liam. "Mr. Harrison, thank you for coming on such short notice." "It's no trouble at all, sir," the lawyer replied. "I have the complete portfolio you requested." He placed his briefcase on the heavy oak coffee table and clicked it open. He began to lay out a series of documents with practiced efficiency, their crisp white pages a stark contrast to the dark wood. Each one was a nail in the coffin of Clara's world. "This," Mr. Harrison said, tapping the first document, "is the separation agreement. It outlines the division of assets, though as you'll see, the vast majority are registered as corporate assets of Thorne and Associates, and therefore not subject to community property laws." He slid another paper forward. "This is the official notice of foreclosure on your parents' estate at 45 Willow Creek Lane. As Mr. Thorne mentioned, Vance Enterprises has defaulted on its primary loan from Thorne Capital. The property was held as the principal collateral." Clara made a choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth. Her childhood home, the monument to her family's legacy. "And this," Harrison continued, his voice a merciless, calm river of facts, "is a comprehensive summary of all expenditures made from corporate accounts for personal use by yourself and your family over the past 5 years, including club memberships, vacations, vehicles, and a substantial monthly stipend paid directly to your mother, Eleanor Vance, categorized under consulting fees in your father's books, but funded, again, by a line of credit from Thorne Capital." The room was silent, save for the rustle of paper and Clara's ragged breathing. The truth was no longer an accusation. It was a stack of legally binding documents on her coffee table. Her entire life, her status, her pride. It was all a sham, a carefully managed illusion funded by the man she had just finished eviscerating. Her shock began to curdle into a desperate, frantic panic. Liam, why? She stammered, her eyes darting between his impassive face and the devastating papers. Why would you do this? Why would you hide all of this from me? I didn't hide it, Clara, he said, his voice finally carrying a trace of weary emotion. I just lived it. You never bothered to look. You saw what you wanted to see. A simple man you could mold, a project you could manage. You never asked about the details of my work. You dismissed my late nights as tinkering. You never once showed any genuine interest in my life, only in how it could better accessorize yours. Just then, Clara's phone buzzed violently on the side table. She snatched it up. It was her father. She answered, her hand trembling. Clara, what is going on? Richard's voice was a panicked roar on the other end. The bank just called. They're calling all our loans. They said Thorn Capital sold our debt. It's Liam, isn't it? What did you do? Put him on the phone. I need to talk to him. Before she could respond, the front door burst open and her parents rushed in, their faces masks of terror. Richard's usual booming confidence had collapsed into a sweaty, desperate haste. Eleanor's serene composure was gone, replaced by a pinched, frantic anxiety. They must have been on their way over the second they got the news. Liam, Richard blustered, striding towards him. There's been a terrible mistake, a misunderstanding. We can work this out. Your company. We had no idea. There is no misunderstanding, Richard, Liam said, his voice cutting through the panic. He stood taller now, or perhaps it was just that everyone else in the room seemed to have shrunk. The quiet architect was gone, and in his place stood Mr. Thorne, the man who owned their world. He began to speak, not with anger, but with the cold, final clarity of a judge reading a verdict. He looked directly at Richard and Eleanor and then at his wife. This was his list of grievances, the final accounting of 1,000 small cuts. For 7 years, I have sat at your dinner table and listened to you mock my little projects. You, Richard, called me timid for refusing to invest in your fraudulent schemes. You, Eleanor, have made it your life's work to point out my perceived inadequacies, from my choice of suit to my taste in wine. And you, Clara, he said, his gaze finally settling on her. You stood by and you laughed. You encouraged it. You used their disdain to fuel your own disappointment in me. He took a step closer, and for the first time, they all flinched away from him, this stranger in their midst. You called me small-time, Richard. Well, my small-time business is in the final stages of acquiring the very bank that holds all of your remaining commercial debt. The deal will close tomorrow morning. You won't just be bankrupt. You'll be answering to me. He turned to Eleanor. You were so concerned about appearances, about people of substance. Substance, Eleanor, is not the brand of your handbag. It is character. It is integrity. It is the quiet work you do when no one is watching. You have none. Finally, he faced Clara. Her face was a mess of tears and disbelief. The pleading had begun in her eyes. Liam, please, she whispered. I didn't know. I love you. We can fix this. Love? He asked, and the word sounded foreign, an artifact from a dead language. You don't love me. You loved the idea of me as your personal project, someone you could elevate. The moment I failed to live up to your ambitions for me, that love curdled into contempt. You said I should thank God you married me. But the truth is, you should have thanked me for allowing you to believe it for so long. He walked over to the entryway table and picked up a small, unassuming box that had been sitting there. It contained a few personal items he'd gathered earlier. A framed photo from the early days of their marriage, a favorite book, the brass key. It was all he wanted from this house, from this life. He turned at the door, looking back at the three of them, a family portrait of ruin. They were frozen, trapped in the wreckage of their own arrogance. You wanted a life where you weren't held back, Clara, he said, his voice soft but final. You have it now. He stepped out into the cool night air, closing the door quietly behind him. He didn't slam it, An empire doesn't end with a bang. It ends with the quiet, final click of a closing lock. 6 months passed. The world turned, seasons changed, and lives were irrevocably altered. The Vance family's downfall was swift and brutal. It was the kind of spectacular collapse that their social circle feasted on for weeks, whispering about it over cocktails at the country club they could no longer afford to enter. Richard Vance's empire, revealed to be a hollowed-out shell, imploded. The foreclosure on their estate was finalized, its contents auctioned off to strangers who picked over the gilded remnants of their former lives. Richard, facing multiple lawsuits from other investors he had duped, was a broken man. Eleanor, stripped of her status and social standing, retreated into a bitter, resentful seclusion. Clara was forced to confront a reality she had never imagined. The friends who had once flocked to her side vanished, their loyalty as superficial as their tans. She had to sell her car, her jewelry, her designer clothes. She moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a part of the city she used to mock. She found a job as an administrative assistant at a mid-level marketing firm, a position that paid her just enough to cover her rent and utilities. The humiliation was a constant, grinding weight. For the first time in her life, she was invisible. She was no longer Clara Vance, the socialite. She was just Clara, a woman in a sensible pantsuit, typing memos and answering phones. Meanwhile, Liam Thorne embraced the life he had always kept in the shadows. He moved permanently into the penthouse atop the Helios Tower. It was a space that reflected him perfectly, minimalist, elegant, and functional, with breathtaking, panoramic views of the city. There were no gilded antiques or ostentatious flower arrangements. Instead, there were shelves filled with books on engineering and philosophy, walls adorned with original architectural sketches, and a state-of-the-art drafting table that was his favorite piece of furniture. He threw himself into his work, but it was no longer a secret. The Forbes article had thrust him into the spotlight, and he handled it with his characteristic quiet grace. He gave few interviews, preferring to let his work speak for itself. He launched a philanthropic foundation dedicated to funding sustainable housing projects in underserved communities, a passion he could now pursue openly. He was the same man he had always been, but the world now saw him clearly. He found that power, real power, was quiet. It didn't need to announce itself. It simply was. One evening, as he was sketching an idea for a new public library, his phone chimed with a notification. It was a voicemail from a number he didn't recognize, but he knew who it was before he even listened. He pressed play, and Clara's voice filled the quiet of his apartment. It was a voice he barely recognized. The sharp, entitled edge was gone, replaced by a soft, hesitant rasp. "I know you have no reason to listen to this, and I'm not calling to ask for anything. I wanted to say I'm sorry." There was a long pause, filled with the sound of her shaky breath. "I've had a lot of time to think," she continued. "These last few months, living this new life, I see things differently now. I see everything differently. I was a fool. I was arrogant and cruel and so blind. I spent our entire marriage trying to turn you into someone else, someone like my father. And I never once saw the incredible man who was right in front of me." Tears were in her voice now, raw and undisguised. "I see you now, Liam. I read all the articles. I see the work you're doing with your foundation. You're building things that matter. I was so obsessed with building a life that looked good from the outside. I never cared if it was rotten on the inside. Mine was. It was all rotten." Another pause. "I know it's too late. I destroyed everything. But I needed you to know that I finally understand. What you didn't do it to be cruel. You did it to be free. You held up a mirror and I finally saw myself. And I was horrifying." She took a final, shuddering breath. "I hope you're happy, Liam. You deserve to be. Goodbye." The voicemail ended. Liam stood by the vast window, looking down at the glittering tapestry of the city lights. He felt a pang, not of love or regret, but of a distant, sorrowful empathy. He was listening to the voice of a woman who had been broken down and was only now beginning to build herself back up, on a new, more honest foundation. Her apology was real. He knew that. He also knew it didn't change anything. Some structures, once they collapse, cannot be rebuilt. He didn't delete the message. He saved it, a final, quiet entry in a ledger that was now closed. It was a reminder that true change is possible, but it often comes at a devastating cost. He had not sought revenge. He had sought truth. And the truth, in the end, had set them both free, albeit on starkly different paths. A few weeks later, he was meeting with a promising young architect named Maya, who was presenting a proposal for a community arts center. She was brilliant, passionate, and her eyes lit up when she talked about structural integrity and the flow of natural light. "What I admire most about your work, Mr. Thorne," she said, looking at him with genuine respect, "is its honesty. There's no unnecessary ornamentation. The strength is in the design itself. It doesn't have to shout." Liam smiled, a real, unguarded smile. "I've always believed that the strongest foundations are the quietest," he said. He looked out the window, at the city stretching to the horizon, a landscape of endless possibility. The past was a blueprint he had filed away. The future was an open space, waiting to be designed. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt truly, profoundly at home. The story of Liam and Clara is a powerful reminder that true worth is not measured by wealth, status, or the approval of others. It is measured by integrity, character, and the quiet dignity with which we live our lives. Arrogance builds walls, but humility builds bridges. And sometimes, the most powerful act is not to raise your voice, but to stand firmly in your own silent truth and let the world reorient itself around you. What do you think? Did Liam do the right thing, or was his response too severe? We'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so vibrant. Thank you for joining us for this story. If it resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more stories of vindication, justice, and the quiet triumph of the human spirit. Until next time, remember to value the quiet foundations in your own life. They are stronger than you think.